Get started. I introduced myself. I'm Casey from Rustic Pathways, and I'm our GAP admissions coordinator. And this will be my fourth summer at Rustic Pathways. Previously, I did some outreach in Europe and ran a couple of our summer programs in Costa Rica. But now I work with our future gap year students and our gap year scholarship recipients, and then it's always fun to interview students or speak with them after their gap year as well. So that's a good transition to SHARIF. SHARIF is here joining us. He traveled on a gap year with us not too long ago to India and Southeast Asia, and we'll hear from him as an alum here in a while. SHARIF, where are you calling us from?
I'm calling from school, Tufts University.
Great. So yeah, Sharif's at Tufts, and thank you for joining tonight, Sharif. And then we also have Megan Doyle, and Megan is our road trip expert tonight. She participated in 2 road trips that she'll tell you about through our partner on this program, Road Trip Nation. And you're calling from, is it Pennsylvania or DC, you said tonight?
DC, currently.
Great. And we'll meet Megan when we go over kind of the road trip portion or the road trip element of this program. So thank you guys for attending. Again, we'll record this for reference later. And we've held webinars before on gap year, what we do on gap year, or the purpose of a gap year. And I think a lot of you that are probably tuning in tonight are familiar with the purpose of a gap year and the function of a gap year. So of course, it's typically a time that a student will take between high school and university, or even during university, for various different reasons. And we see a lot of students take their gap year, whether it's one of the points on the list here for academic burnout. Maybe they've attended a really good school, but they just need a breather before they do well again in university. We see a lot of students take a gap year if they haven't really narrowed to a major. Maybe they don't want to spend their freshman year in an exploratory major. They'd like to go in really purposefully and knock out an undergrad in 3 or 4 years. But we see several different reasons that a student will take a gap year. And then the benefits, the biggest 4 benefits that we not only feel our students get out of a gap year, but the students express themselves, is that they gain life experience and they really grow personally. I think a huge part of traveling internationally during a gap year is kind of gaining that cross-cultural understanding that a student can, and gaining the empathy of working with people, in other parts of the globe. Of course, it's a good time to recover from academic burnout. We see some really great students on our gap year programs. Gap year in the United States, of course, in some pockets, kind of has the stigma of a student that maybe has performed poorly, or they just don't have a direction. And while we do host students that maybe haven't done as well academically as others, that's definitely not all of our students traveling on gap years. So even those that have done really well just want or need a breather if they've worked hard on senior year and college applications, before they start their undergrad career. Of course, explore career options is a huge benefit of a gap year. That's, of course, the one we'll focus on tonight with the road trip program. And then through the service portion of our gap years, and that is a component on the road trip one, helping others. And you'll hear, it's always fascinating that on some of our programs that feature these amazing adventure activities like whitewater rafting or bungee jumping, or even skydiving or something, a lot of the students will express at the end of the program or after they return home that maybe the service portion, or running an after-school program at a rural Fijian school, or helping get produce to a market for a Fijian family, that really ends up being some of the highlights of their program. So we really like that as one of the pillars of a gap year. So to speak on the one of those 4 points that we'll really focus on tonight, career exploration, and how career exploration can happen not just on a road trip gap year, but as well on some of our other styles of gap year programs. And this program was really born out of hearing from students what they would have if they could maybe design their own gap year program, or some of the things they desired, components that maybe weren't featured in other gap year programs that they wish to see. And two of those were more independence and flexibility on the program, and to interview people that are in careers or majors or fields of study that they may want to do or study in college. So a huge benefit of this being one of the four kind of outcomes of a gap year is a student gets to more or less try a career before they commit to it, to study to it for 4 years of university. And we really saw, positive response from students and families when we added this gap year style. So as well, like I mentioned, the added independence. We'll get into kind of the nitty gritty or the details and itinerary of the program a little bit later tonight, but students do see and have a little bit more responsibility and independence on this style of road trip program than they may on a few of our other programs. And for some students, that's really the right type of gap year that they're looking for if they're ready, to help build the itinerary and to help make calls to schedule lunch interviews and things of that nature. So our partner in this program is Road Trip Nation, and they're a really neat organization. If you haven't visited their website, write it down right now. Don't visit right now. Stay on the webinar, but make a point to visit it later tonight or over the weekend. It's roadtripnation.com, and 15 years ago, their founders went on a road trip for the same purpose that they're still going on road trips, and that was just to find people that they could interview in different professional fields that at one time in their life faced the question, what do I do with my life? And they've amassed hundreds, if not thousands, I think. Is that right, Megan? I mean, between 15 years of these and several seasons.
It's possible. It's possible.
Thousands of interviews from people in different fields about their struggles in a career or in school, and about their successes in their careers and how they got there, what their path was, or maybe what flukes or luck they found or what connections put them there. And with that information, with all of that data and all of those interviews, they've done some really, they've done not just the television shows that they've had on PBS, but they've done some really great books. So they have a book series. Their latest one is Roadmap. You can see it on their website, and it's really kind of their new project of showing that this is accessible to everyone. That sure, a road trip is a great way to go about it, but career exploration can happen, in other ways as well. So they are definitely the career exploration experts in this partnership. We bring to the table the travel experience and the community service experience here. So Road Trip Nation, I mentioned, has the PBS television show. Definitely visit that on their website. And in that series of shows, they've interviewed people like Howard Schultz, the Starbucks CEO, the musician John Legend, and then my favorite, Jad Abumrad, the host or the co-host of a popular podcast called Radiolab. And that's actually one of the individuals that Megan interviewed on her road trip. So we'll hear about him later. And then with those making them accessible to students, through books and through their show is a really kind of neat endeavor. So definitely look them up. And then Rustic Pathways. We have done these service learning adventures since 1983. And you're tuning in, of course, to learn more about a gap year, but we also run summer programs for high school students, and we do groups programs for schools during the school year. So that's advantageous in that we have local staff and local employees in each of the 20 countries where we're traveling. And these local employees work for our organization full-time, year-round. And they really, for the students that are traveling in their country, provide a really deep service experience or travel experience because the students can encounter and get to know and work directly with individuals that are from the countries where they're traveling. We feature kind of three components on all of our programs, whether it's the private groups programs, summer, or students traveling with us in gap year. And we want travel adventures. That could be in the form of, like I mentioned before, bungee jumping. It could also be eating exotic foods for the first time. We have education. So scuba diving is a great example on the screen right now. Our wilderness first responder or language study is a component as well, and then community service, of course. So all of our programs feature a service component, and we'll speak about the service component of the Road Trip Nation program in a minute, but as well of the other gap year programs. So the other types of programs in addition to the road trip that we run are in order on this screen in a scale of independence. So these 4 types of programs each provide a potential student with 4 individual experiences or 4 potential experiences. And in service and exploration programs, which you'll hear about from SHARIF in a moment, are guided programs with a planned itinerary where a student group of a few more than a dozen students will travel with 2 or 3 program leaders for 3 months in 4 or 5 different countries. And we run those programs in Southeast Asia, South Pacific, and in spring of 2017, we'll run one again in Africa. We also have a Spanish immersion and service program, and it's similar to the service and exploration programs, but it has more independence in the form of a homestay. So students spend a couple weeks in each of the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and Peru living with local families, and then, of course, attending classes in the morning to study Spanish immersion, and then using that Spanish or those lessons in the service that they do in the afternoons and evenings. We have road trips, of course. In the scale, we rank those as the 3rd most independent program that we run because the students are helping design the itinerary. It's smaller groups, 7 or 8 students, and it's a bit more responsibility to plan and have a hand and an active participation in the designing of that program at the beginning part. And then internship semesters are really quite independent. A student would live and work in one of 4 different countries and work for a partner organization on one service project for the duration of their whole 3 months. So this is where a student is really living on their own as if they're, on a college campus or in a college dorm freshman year, but instead they're doing service instead of academic study, and they would have a weekly check-in with one of us on the ground. So to see more about these, I'll have contact information at the end, and then of course, visit our website at gap.rusticpathways.com. So we'll hear from SHARIF first. SHARIF traveled with us, like I mentioned, in India and in Southeast Asia, and he is now attending Tufts University, where he's from in Boston. And since I've had the pleasure of meeting SHARIF in Boston as well when he came out and helped us out with some other gap year events. So SHARIF, let us know about your program.
Awesome. Glad that people are here. I'm SHARIF. I'm from Boston, as Casey said. I did Rustic Pathways, a gap semester in the spring of 2015, a year after I graduated high school. So I graduated in the summer of 2014 and then did a gap semester in the spring after that. I guess my experience starts, it's kind of a weird story because I definitely did not see myself taking a gap year after high school. It was just something that towards the end of my time I realized would be a good idea, but at the beginning of my senior year I definitely could not have seen it coming. And my best friend had actually did a gap year through Rustic Pathways the year before, and towards the end, when I was sort of coming towards a decision of either going to one of my top schools or considering a gap year and doing Rustic, I talked to him a lot about it, and his experience was sort of what pushed me on to take the risk essentially and try Rustic. We went to a prep school where everyone goes to college, so for someone to take a year off, it was definitely, you were definitely sort of an outlier in a way, but he expressed to me how much he was able to grow and how much of an amazing experience he had while with Rustic. And there was just something about what he said that made me want to do it, and I've definitely had a similar experience. I was with Rustic in Southeast Asia for 3 months. I went to places that I could have never imagined being. I got to meet people who are from all over the world, and I'm still friends with a lot of those people. I had 2 amazing Western staff members that I still keep in contact with, and I had amazing local guides that I still keep in contact with. So my experience with Rustic has definitely been very positive, and that's why I'm here sharing more about it right now. Um, I'm not sure how much more I can say off the top of my head, but if any questions at all, I don't know, Casey, if you want to sort of guide that now or later, I'm more than happy to speak more about my experience, but it has definitely been a positive one, and I'm very appreciative of the experience that I had.
Yeah. What about, I mean, you're studying economics at Tufts,
Yeah,
right? Is there
yeah, absolutely.
any experience that you had on your gap year that kind of led you to that decision to study economics? Had you decided economics previous to your gap year? Tell us a little bit about
Um,
that.
yeah, I was undecided going into my gap year, and you know, my gap year gave me the opportunity to make my decision. My roommate's a little different. Like my roommate did not take a gap year, and he is currently sort of battling with the idea of pursuing engineering or something in the School of Arts and Sciences. And that's sort of taken up a lot of his freshman year, whereas I had the opportunity to really think through what I wanted out of my freshman year and what I wanted out of my college experience to be just more comfortable and confident in uh, my time on campus, because I only have so many years, and I just wanted to make sure that um, whatever decision I made, it was something I felt comfortable with, and having a year to think about it, being able to take on experiences that I couldn't have imagined, definitely helped with that. But I think actually something that I forgot to mention, but the sort of the adversity of being one of the very few who don't directly matriculate to college in itself is an experience that is very meaningful, because it was definitely not easy. Um, seeing all your friends on a campus where you sort of believe that you belong, but I think you know there's sort of like that adversity that you face when you're one of the few that aren't that isn't with everyone else, definitely allows you to feel more comfortable when you're on campus, because like any freshman you're going to face a bunch of ups and downs throughout the year, but you're able to put things into perspective after a year where you sort of experience a whole new life, and something that I would say I definitely wasn't accustomed to, and I think most 18-year-olds aren't accustomed to. And my gap year definitely helped me feel confident in my decisions while at college so far.
Great. Great. Have you done any travel since, or do you have any travel plans in the future? Maybe study abroad? Um, anything?
Yeah. So following my gap year, I actually went to Jamaica. My family's from Jamaica, so I visited after that. But I definitely am a lot more persistent on getting back to Asia now, having done the Southeast Asia gap semester. I'm sort of mapping out my classes over the next year so that I'm able to go to Hong Kong through Tufts as a junior, and I would actually love to work in Southeast Asia for a couple of years following school, just because I had such an amazing time there during my 3 months. I'm like a lot of some of my rustic classmates want to explore other places, but like I really appreciated what I was doing while I was there, but now, like a year later, knowing that I was in Dharamshala, India on this day, like that really sinks in. It really makes me appreciate sort of how unique of an opportunity and time I had, and I'm desperate to go back and do it again and sort of really soak it all in.
Yeah. You mentioned your peers or your colleagues on the program. Are you still in touch with most of the group that you traveled with during those 3 months?
Yeah, definitely. Very much so. There's a lot of us in the Northeast. There are a couple people who are also from Boston. Um, one of my best friends goes to Harvard, so we meet up every once in a while. He's friends with my friends from high school that go to Harvard. There's a small group in Pennsylvania. There's a couple of DC people, so we all definitely still text and communicate. And I've seen a few of them over the course of the last year, and we're all just trying to figure out a way to continue to see each other.
Reunite.
When you live with people for 3 months, it's kind of hard not to grow a strong bond with them.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good. You've been able to see them in person,
Yeah,
and that
absolutely.
it's cool that you're trying to coordinate maybe your reunion with the group or something.
Yeah,
Definitely let me know or let us know if and when you guys can make that happen. I would suggest a road trip, road trip together, but biased
maybe.
there.
Yeah.
So great. Thank you very much, Sharif.
Okay.
When we transition here from Sharif to Megan, I wanted to remind everyone that's tuning into, you can submit a question for any of the three of us during the program. You'll find on your screen, the GoToWebinar portion of your screen, there's a question and answer section. So send questions. If it is relevant to what we're talking about, we'll address it immediately. Otherwise, stick around until our last slide and we'll go through and speak about or answer each of the questions that was submitted during the thing. So Megan, are you still there?
I am.
Great. So we heard from Sharif about his gap year, traveling abroad, and kind of how that led to him to a career decision or a major decision at least. Megan encountered Road Trip Nation when she was studying at Bucknell, and now she works in education in Washington, D.C. So we'll hear about her experiences with Road Trip Nation and kind of how that led her to where she is now.
Great. So I want to start by echoing Sharif's sentiment about how there is just so much opportunity for personal growth in an experience like this in a road trip or really any sort of extensive travel experience. So really the personal growth kind of transcends any professional or career practicalities. That being said, I completely understand if some of you are feeling curious or maybe even a little apprehensive about how this experience might impact your future plans for getting into college or getting a job. And I did my road trip the summer after I graduated college. So I also had an experience where I was seeing my peers go in one direction and I was doing something totally different. And that can be kind of alienating. My friends were getting the keys to their first apartment and I had the keys to a motorhome. And they were starting their, entry-level jobs at these important and respectable companies, and I was going to go talk to strangers for a while. So I definitely felt out of sync with them, and I was telling myself a lot of stories that I was maybe behind and I might be limited. Now I can confidently say 4 years out that not only did my road trip experience not limit me in any way, but it has opened so many doors for me, and I can point to 4 to 5 professional experiences that I've had since then that have roots in my road trip experience, indirectly or very directly. So in the interest of time, I'm going to speak mainly about 2 ways that I believe my road trip experience has developed me as a person and a professional. There are plenty more, but we'll stick with 2. The first is this idea of exploration, and I think I was probably on one end of the spectrum in that I knew I wanted to be a teacher since I was 9 years old. I majored in education the moment I set foot on campus. I now have my master's in education. I've been a classroom teacher. So I was pretty goal-oriented and I had a plan. My 2 teammates that I was traveling with fell a little bit on the other end of the spectrum. My one teammate, Jackie, she was going into a PhD program. She knew she wants to study chemistry, but at that time she wasn't sure what she wanted to do with it. And my other teammate, Zachariah, he had so many passions and interests, and he wasn't sure how he was going to choose just one or combine them into some sort of viable path. So I saw the road trip experience benefit people on any end of that spectrum, whether you have an idea like I did or you're not totally sure like Zachariah and Jackie were. No matter what, no matter where you fall on that spectrum, the interviews with these professionals are going to introduce you to career paths that you've never even heard of before. And at this stage in the game, you don't know what you don't know. And it really took me getting out of my own network to hear about some of these careers. I've never heard of some of them. And they might be something that you want to try. They might be something you want to explore further. And you haven't even heard of them until you meet this person who describes what their day-to-day life is like. So the idea of career exploration, if you aren't sure what you want to do, you're going to learn about 40 some odd careers that you may have never even heard of. And I think for me, what was really fantastic is I saw people who had combined different interests into one viable career. And I think that was really important for me because I had let a lot of my interests kind of fall to the wayside as I was pursuing my teaching degree. And after I graduated, and after doing the road trips, I actually didn't set foot in a classroom for another 6 months. I pursued a lot of other interests. I did another road trip for Road Trip Nation, advocating for this experience at college campuses. And then I traveled in Ireland for 2 weeks. And then I ended up working for a nonprofit, and I helped them plan a cross-country trip to promote their cause. And I ended up going to Africa with that organization. So I had all these experiences that I allowed myself the time to explore, because I had seen all these individuals on the road trip doing more than one thing at a time. And in addition to just seeing it, you're going to get career advice from all these individuals who love their job. And there's no one better to get career advice from than someone who loves going to work every day. And I can't even tell you how many times I've sort of referenced the library of career advice I have in my head, because I either have to make a choice or I have to face a challenge, and I have all of this lived experience that I got from these interviews. And there's nothing better than lived experience. And I don't have that much myself, but I've borrowed all this lived experience from other people. And if ever I get into a situation where I don't think I know what to do, and I don't have advice sort of stored in that library, I now know how to get it. I know that I can contact somebody that I admire, ask them a question, and see if I can't pick their brain about what they might do in my situation. So that exploration piece was so crucial for me and helped me stay focused on my goal, but also allow myself to explore other interests that I had and other things I wanted to try out. The second way that my road trip experience really set me up for career fulfillment now are all of the soft skills. And I mean, if you look at like Forbes or Business Insider or any of these websites, you're going to see time and time again the top 10 skills that an entrepreneur needs to start a new business, or top 10 skills that companies want and look for in new hires. And time and again, the same things are at the top of those lists. And just being on the road trip, planning it, working together with a team, and solving the day-to-day problems on the road, you cannot help but develop those skills. So take communication, for example. Written and verbal communication is one of the things that new hires need to have for any position. And you are going to be trying to convince these important people who are very busy and who don't know you to give up some of their time to tell you about their life. So I developed phone etiquette. I developed a way to craft clear and well-written and respectful emails requesting these interviews, and you get tons of practice. So you can't help but get good at communicating. Then you're in these interviews asking these personal questions, and you figure out how to do that tactfully so that you're still being your authentic self. You don't sound robotic, but you are professional and respectable. And then the big one, teamwork. You're going to be planning this trip even though you might live in different areas. So my team and I was at school, as was everyone else, and we were communicating once a week via Skype, and we had Google Docs going and an email thread, and we coordinated all the moving parts of this trip together, including the route we were going to take, what cities we were going to stop in, who we were going to interview. All these things that needed to be planned, we did from far away, and that took a lot of communication and teamwork skills. Not to mention when you start the road trip, then you're living and working 24/7. It's such an immersive experience, and you have to work as a team because you need to solve problems on the road, you need to make decisions, and you cannot help but develop your teamwork. Speaking of problem solving, I think some of my best memories and best teachable moments from the road are the things that you can't plan for. And if you had told me before I left that I would be driving an RV and trying to figure out if I'm going to clear an underpass, or if you told me that there was going to be like torrential downpour that flooded our RV and we had to figure out what to do, I might have said, I can't handle that. But in the moment, you have all the resources you need, and you make decisions, and you lean on your team members, and you communicate your needs, and you're empathetic and accommodating to the needs of your team, and you get things done. So you can't help but hone these soft skills on an experience like this, and I can't even tell you how many times I've referenced my road trip experience in an interview situation when somebody has asked me a question like, describe a time where you had to be collaborative. All these examples rush to my mind. Back to the whole being out of sync with your peers, I think the best way to get the most out of this experience as a person and as professional development is to stop yourself from comparing where you are at with where your peers are at. And because sometimes you're going to feel like you are behind, and other times you're going to feel like you're ahead. And either way, you're not really paying attention to where you are and what you're doing. So, my advice to anyone who decides to go on this road trip experience or any other sort of gap year situation is to really unplug. If you want to share your story, keep it in like a private journal. If you want to take photos, don't be posting them too much, because any sort of comparison you do is going to cheapen the experience for you. And there will be times where you look at people doing things that seem more adult or more responsible or more legitimate, but that's just sort of a story you're telling yourself. And if you can quiet that voice long enough to refocus your attention to where you're at, you're going to be all the better for it.
That's really, really resonates. Megan, thank you. You spoke a little bit about earlier encountering professions that you didn't even know about when you embarked on the road trip. I saw from your group's list of your interviews, a radio host, a skydive instructor, a nuclear scientist, a food scientist. Are there any that really particularly stuck out to you, or which of those were the ones that you weren't aware of previous to traveling?
I think a lot of them, because we were focused particularly on people in science, technology, engineering, and math, a lot of them were careers that I hadn't heard of just because I wasn't as familiar with those fields. So we interviewed several people who worked at NASA, and one gentleman was developing fuel for airplanes and cars based on the oils that grow in this sort of plant that grows in salt water. I had never heard anything about that. So those were just fascinating just because I like to learn about it. But there were also all these people who were talking about teaching, which I was studying and now had my degree in. They were talking about teaching, but they had combined it with something else. So one woman, Susie Clark, she started as a teacher, then she shifted into writing curriculum, and her current role when we interviewed her, she was part of an outdoor education group in the Redwoods. So she led field trips and groups and helped connect kids with nature, and really the entire redwood forest was her classroom. And that was a really eye-opening thing for me to see that what I was becoming really skilled in didn't have just this narrow application that I had already known. There were people who were taking the skills that I had and combining it with their other loves and their other interests and doing really great things that were really getting them excited.
Yeah. No, I think that is similar to what Sharif said of maybe upon graduation, working in Southeast Asia, and seeing that a teacher could be a teacher in a classroom or in the Redwoods, and, an individual with an economy degree could be anywhere as well as international and traveling where they want. So one thing too that really is reflective of what some of our students tell us when they go on these gap year programs is that it's not a matter of a lack of interest going into university, but rather it's so many different interests to choose from, and going into university, has them narrowing down that interest to just one or two major. You spoke about your peer on the road trip, Zachariah. What is his career currently, or what is he up to? And you mentioned, about him, how he had so many different interests to narrow down to, and that was kind of his, his perspective on the road trip.
I think it's so expensive to explore in college because if you take a lot of elective courses, you might not graduate on time, and it's really expensive to do that in the framework of a four-year institution. So I think Zachariah was lucky in that he was on the road trip between his junior and senior year, so he got to really get all this insight and then take it back to his senior year. And he was studying geology, and he's currently working in carpentry. So there's all these meandering ways that your path can go. And I myself was really grateful to do this exploration after graduation because I had 6 months of a grace period before my student loans were due. So I was doing all these adventures, I was volunteering, I was traveling before I had to start paying my loans back. So it's really awesome to use this time when you can afford to do these things, so that when you do make a decision, it's coming from a more informed place.
Yeah. A former webinar attendee of ours, Lance, actually, he was on Sharif's program. Sharif knows Lance. he said something similar it was the time to take a gap year when he knew he had his health, the resources, and no obligations. It really really worked well before a career did get off the ground. You did this road trip after your undergrad. Did you do it before or after your graduate degree in education?
I did it before my graduate degree. So
Okay,
I graduated with my bachelor's May of 2012, and that summer of 2012 and that fall of 2012, I
okay,
was traveling with Road Trip Nation.
gotcha.
And um, I ended up going back to school in 2014. And again, with all the knowledge that I had from traveling and working, I was able to choose a program that was a really good fit so that I wasn't questioning if I was investing my time and energy wisely or not. I knew that it was something I wanted to pursue because I had done my homework.
Yeah, we have a submitted question about that, and I'll have you, Sharif, answer the same one after Megan. And the question is, was it difficult to start school after you came back from your gap year? And if we just call your road trip your gap year, what was your transition back into academic life like of returning for your graduate studies?
Okay, I want to word this really carefully. I think that I took school very, very seriously, and I always did well, and I tried very hard, but I also was almost a little neurotic about school. And I think going on this road trip shifted my perspective about learning and how much I valued it. And I think I had gotten out of touch with that school is for learning. And so, not to say that I was slacking off when I went back to school, but I had a different approach. I was still very committed and invested in doing my best, but I wasn't chasing a grade. I wasn't chasing anyone's praise or approval. I was really coming back into school from the angle of my personal and professional development. And I'm really grateful that I did that because getting a graduate degree is a lot of work. And if you're not in it for the right reasons, it could really be discouraging. So it is a little bit challenging to go from having, a lot of freedom and every day looks different and, not having to turn in any papers or things like that. It is a little challenging to go from that experience to a more formal academic institution. But for me, I'm so glad that it worked out that way because I think if I had gone straight, I might have really burnt out in my graduate degree because I was coming at learning from what is it going to help me do later instead of what is it helping me learn now. And that changed after doing an experience like this.
Yeah. And we'll transition, I'd like to hear, Sharif, your response to that as well. And while you're kind of tuning back in here, for our individual that asked the question, I can say the same. I took a gap year between my sophomore and junior years of university, and within my family and my community and even my school, one of the responses was, "Oh, you'll never want to go back. You'll have so much fun abroad. You won't want to return." And I actually returned with a lot better focus, a different major, and what Megan said, kind of a different approach to why I was in school in the first place, to learn something I was really serious or passionate about learning. So, Sharif, how about you? After traveling India, Asia, all of these amazing experiences, what was it like being back in the classroom?
It was amazing. I'm very glad to be back. And that's not to say that I didn't have a great time in Asia, but I really miss being in a just a thoroughly like intellectual community. And I think, as students, we take it for granted, how awesome it is to discuss, whatever it is we like. I love talking about history and poli sci and things like that. And it's great to have, 5,000 people around me to talk about that with. And, I it definitely allowed me to have a greater appreciation for what I'm doing now, while also still, enjoying the moment, the time that I had in Asia, essentially. And when it comes to the transition, I thought it was a very solid one because I was just so eager to get back in the classroom. I think that the discipline that is learned during a year abroad, or not a year, not a full year, but a time away from home, is something that, although isn't exactly the same, definitely prepares you for being focused in college again. So I don't feel as if there was too big of a transition. I think that um, being abroad definitely helped me appreciate being back home even more.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you guys very much. We'll have a couple more questions, it looks like, but we'll address those at the end when we finish up. I'll transition here to talk a little bit about how this is all achieved on the program. In the meantime, let's grab another poll question, see if everyone is still there. Um, since we just heard from Megan on her road trips, let's see what everyone's road trip essential is. If you guys are at your computers, give us a quick answer, what you think. If you're on a road trip, what is the one thing you really want to have with you? Megan and Sharif, can you see the poll too?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead and answer if you can. What's your choice?
Snacks.
Snacks.
I would go with snacks.
Snacks. Sharif, what's the most unique snack you ate in India or in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I can't remember the snacks to be honest, but yeah, I'm a big guy, so I just ate everything.
Ate it
Uh,
all.
yeah, I love the meal.
There's a video on the Rustic Pathways YouTube of a group of our students trying fried tarantulas in Cambodia.
Oh,
Did you encounter
we did.
anything like that? Yeah?
We did, yeah.
Well, yeah,
Our final dinner.
it didn't even come to mind. It must have been so typical for you, huh? No?
Yeah, I mean, Western food is obviously very different from the cuisine in Asia, and we went to 6 countries, so every place we went, there was something new. So, every day we were trying something that we would have never imagined trying
Something new.
before, particularly like, right away in Vietnam.
Yeah,
And then, by the time we got to Cambodia, eating insects wasn't, that daunting because every time we try something new, it actually turned out to be really good. So
it's the everyday
it
occurrence.
was,
Megan, any favorite snacks of the season 10 Road Trip Nation crew?
Oh my gosh. So I was already very addicted, but really reinforced my addiction to frosted mini wheats on my road trip. Like, I think I was going through a box a day at one point. But the best part about the road trip for me was stopping at these local places and getting the regional cuisine of whatever state we happened to be in.
Yeah,
And the best thing for that would be, pulling into a gas station and just asking someone like, "Hey, what's good around here?" And we were very rarely steered wrong, and there was just so much to offer.
yeah, that's really interesting, and that is kind of the highlight of a road trip is the potential to kind of run across those unique things you didn't expect. Whether that's
Mm-hmm.
something quirky or some food that you're not accustomed to, and even to have a chance to do that within your own country is, a country as big as ours or as diverse. That's really fun. So snacks one, snacks. Everyone's bringing snacks. A couple of people are bringing music, and a few others are bringing a camera. So that's good. No one's bringing a map. That's good. That's a good road trip. You get lost. So cool.
Somebody should probably have a map.
Yeah, we have GPS. We'll bring a phone. So to bring, we heard a lot of the similar things from both Sharif and Megan. You both kind of talked about skill building, and like we mentioned in the programs, of a skill could be a hard skill like a scuba certification or a wilderness first responder certification, and then Megan had that great example of skills of driving in a torrential downpour, or I'm sure you probably had to change a road trip nation RV tire once, or picking up on those skills too that are related to doing the interviews, of making the cold calls to ask someone if they have an hour free in their day to speak with you, or if they want to have a quick lunch so you can ask them, um, about their career or how they got there. And then you both also spoke a lot about new experiences and how there were some really unexpected things or unexpected turns in both of your experiences, whether that was this time or these few months after finishing undergrad, or like in Sharif's case, between high school and university. Personal growth. You both seem to have spoken a lot about kind of the growth that happened during the trip that led you to maybe the path that you're on now. And that path is different than maybe what others are accustomed to. That's something that you both kind of started with. And, you know, Megan, you mentioned you had all these ideas in mind of how it had to be, or how you had to go from one kind of hoop to the next, and that you deviated from that. And Sharif, you did the same in a gap year. You, instead of going straight from high school, summer off and right into freshman year, you know, it was unique. And it seems like for both of you, taking that different path was really empowering, of not maybe doing lockstep what the rest were doing. So that's great. So in this program, that is exactly what we want to achieve. We want to combine the experiences that Sharif and Megan just expressed. So the program is actually broken into 4 phases, and it's a 3-month program that we're running in 4 different locations. So if a student travels on a road trip with us, they choose if they want to run their road trip in USA, Australia, India, or in Southeast Asia. And each of those 4 locations the phases will look the same. So that first week, students arrive, they meet each other, they meet their program leaders, and that week, no matter which of the road trips they've chosen, occurs in Los Angeles. So the whole group, all of the 4 road trip groups of 7 or 8 students each, will get together, get to know each other, on board, do some team building, and just kind of set the scene for the 3 months that they're about to spend. Then the second phase is they'll break into their road trip group. So USA group will go to their destination. India road trip will fly and travel to India together. The Australia group will leave for Australia. And their first arrival there, their first week in location, will be spent laying out all of the maps, planning the route as much as possible, and making these calls and sending these emails to set up these interviews, these visits, these lunches, or kind of these happenstance encounters that they hope to have with people that are in fields or professions that they're interested in. So this step, I think, is where I think huge growth can really happen in this step, because of course the road trip portion is the romantic part. You're actually driving, you're out on the road. But I think this second phase of scheduling these interviews really touches on what Megan spoke about, of these are things that employers and that colleges really want to see. I mean, that's great to have a road trip that visited 5 or 6 different national parks, but to be able to tell an employer of the purpose of that road trip was actually to interview 5 people in a month and learn about their careers and, you know, schedule a meeting with them. Those are skills that will really are not found on a lot of, you know, gap year programs or time in between high school and university. So after that phase is complete and the students have as much of their route planned as possible, then the road trip starts. So the road trip is, of course, the bulk of the 3 months. It's not the first 2 weeks, and then it's not the final week, but that road trip will take them to wherever those individuals are that they've set up those encounters or those interviews with. And a question that I've encountered from some families and students is, well, what about if I'm interested in engineering, but my peer is interviewing a chef that day, then am I present? Am I participating? What do I do? Do I just stand around? Not at all. I think that's what Megan spoke about when she mentioned that you can learn about careers that you didn't even know before, or maybe you're not just narrowing down interests in a gap year, but you're also learning about interests that you may not have known you had prior to this experience. So I think those are really some of the potentially most powerful days of maybe picking up on something that a professional says that you didn't expect to hear because it wasn't in a field of your initial interest. So I think that could really be powerful if we have students on a program that come from 8 significantly different industry interests. So then on the road trip, of course, between these encounters and interviews and meetings, then the students will choose what the activities are to fill the rest of the days. And that could be anything from visiting a national park. If we're driving, let's say, from Atlanta to DC, we'll cross the Appalachian Trail. The group could go hiking for 2 days. Really, all possibilities are on the table. And that's where we really seek creative students that are ready for that responsibility of being responsible for their itinerary on this program. Now, the program leaders are doing the actual driving, so they're driving the transportation. And then in the international versions of these road trips, so in Southeast Asia and India particularly, there would be an additional staff, a Rustic Pathways staff member, that would be a local staff to do any translating or any cultural type of transition that they would need to be present for. That, of course, we won't need in the USA or Australia as much. Then the final week of the road trip, the final phase, is that everyone, all 4 road trips, return back together for their final week in New Orleans. So they all meet again in New Orleans. They stay at the Rustic Pathways base house. And part of that time in New Orleans will be doing service. Service is an option during the road trip as well, if the students so choose. During New Orleans, however, we'll do service in a project that we work on in our Rustic Pathways summer programs that is rebuilding still after Hurricane Katrina, almost a decade ago now. So they'll work on that, but they'll also work then again, just like week 1 in Los Angeles, with professionals from Road Trip Nation and Rustic Pathways on what to do with all this information. You've interviewed these people, you've heard what they would do, if they were in your shoes again as a young student about to start university. How do you take that information, that data, all of those interviews that you've learned from, and enter university with it and make that information productive for yourself? So that, I think, is really the week that it comes home for a lot of people. And I think it will be interesting too for, let's say, Road Trip India to compare and hear about the experiences of Road Trip Australia or Road Trip USA. So that'll be neat that they get to see each other again after that. So that's the 4 phases of the program. There's, of course, a lot of little intricacies and details of not just all of the gap year programs, but of the road trip program in particular. And for any more information about those, where students could potentially stay, what do you eat, all of those questions, definitely visit our website or send us an email. I'm happy to schedule a call with anyone that has additional questions after this webinar. So you can visit our website at gap.rusticpathways.com, and then you can email us at gap@rusticpathways.com or Casey at rusticpathways.com too. And then Road Trip Nation, definitely get in touch with them if you have questions about what they do. To see their television show, visit their website. It's roadtripnation.com. And Jason is our partner there. I was able to visit him a couple weeks ago, and it was really, really cool facilities to tour. And with the green RVs sitting all over the parking lot, it was really kind of surreal. But get at him, Jason at Road Trip Nation. And then Megan and Sharif will post their information. You can send them questions through me. I'm happy to forward them to them if you have questions for them after the webinar as well. That is the nature of this Road Trip Nation gap year program. So we want you to maybe get starting on interviewing them the way that you would interview professionals on the actual gap year program. So Sharif and Megan, I have a couple more questions for you guys, it looks like. One came in. Let's see, do you know anyone who went on a gap year with Rustic and decided to work with Rustic? What are the job opportunities? Megan, let's say the same thing with Road Trip Nation. Do you know anyone that went on a Road Trip Nation road trip and now currently works for the organization?
Yeah, I do. So after my road trip, I stayed on as an employee temporarily to do a fall tour. And there are other individuals who stayed on and started working in the video editing side of things, in the community outreach side of things, the education side of things. So there's definitely people who extended their relationship with Road Trip Nation to include another type of experience.
Yeah, and to answer this, I don't know of any colleagues that did gap year, but a lot of colleagues did summer programs. I took a gap year. I didn't do it with Rustic Pathways. I did it, like I said, between sophomore and junior years of university. What I did, however, is more on the independent end of the spectrum. So I kind of would have placed mine somewhere around road trips and internships, the experience that I had. But I do have a lot of colleagues that have traveled with us as students in the summer. So that is common. We do have the internship programs. And then each summer we do host internships. Those are filled, those positions, for this coming year, but look in the future on our careers page for internships, whether it's abroad or maybe in one of our domestic offices here in the future. So I've got one for you, Sharif. If you could go back in time, would you change anything about your gap year experience?
That's a hard one. Yeah, I would actually. I think that there were a few days where I was exhausted. I know I missed like maybe 3 days of activities where I just stayed in and just sort of like hung in by myself and rested. I really wish that I didn't do that. I was only in Southeast Asia for 3 months. I was only in, some countries for 7 days, maybe a little bit longer. And I think that looking back, looking at the photos that I have, every second was meaningful. And to not have, I'm bummed that I essentially let like being tired, stop me from, experiencing another day of something that is so foreign but yet so amazing. So I wish there wasn't a second that I missed on the trip, essentially.
Yeah, that's that's why I think a lot of, if you're traveling for any amount of time that's as long as several months, it's an easy one to make. Sharif, what did your parents think of going on a gap year? And after that, Megan, what did your parents think of you joining this road trip?
My mom hated it. My
Really?
mom was not happy about it.
How does she feel now, though? I actually met your mom. Does she?
Yeah.
What were her feelings or sentiments after you returned home?
Oh, she loved. I mean, once we got into the gap year, she was very comfortable with it. But I'm the first person in my family to go to college. We're immigrants. My mom's life goal, everything that she's put her life towards essentially has been for me to go to college. So for me to tell her at the end of my senior year that, I'm going to take a year off from college, she was not very happy about it. But I honestly don't think it took too much convincing just because, um, there were examples of, my, classmates of mine that did gap years and people who went with Rustic and they've all been very successful. They were all very successful following their gap year. One of my best friend um, did the Latin America like immersion program and was fluent in Spanish after his time with Rustic. And being able to sort of bring up examples of the beauty in a gap year. It made it very it made it a lot easier to persuade her. And then once coming back from
Oh,
like once I
we
was
lose
in
Sharif.
Asia, she
You're back.
loved it.
And Megan?
Can, yeah. Can everything good? Yeah.
Yeah, I just paused there for a second. I don't know if the attendees experienced that. It was just a little technical blip, it seemed like.
Okay.
But that's
Right.
good. Your mom's feelings were dynamic from beginning to end of the gap year.
Yeah.
Maybe she grew as much as you did in that.
Maybe.
Yeah. How about you, Megan?
I think that any pushback that I got from my family was in my own head because at the end of the day, they wanted what's best for me. And when I was clear about what I wanted to get out of it, and when I was really purposeful and driven about what I wanted to make it, I didn't have to convince anybody of the value. A lot of my friends who are older and my age were envious of this kind of experience. And I think I had a lot of support from friends and family. It was really just my own fear of um, being legitimate or being respectable that was making me perceive that people were not supportive of it. In reality, I think if you really get squared up with yourself about why you want to do this and what it is about, you're not going to have that many people telling you it's a waste of your time because they're hearing you explain all the things you're going to do, all the people you're going to meet, all the skills you're going to hone. I think that for a road trip nation type experience where you are really responsible from beginning to end for taking control of your own experience, it's hard for people to look at you and say that you're wasting your time. You're not loafing around, you're not, just on vacation. You really are experiencing something truly incredible and really significant for your development as a young person. So I think any sort of what side eye I was getting, I think I was making it up, if I'm being honest.
Sure, sure. Oh, we have another question. How are the interviews chosen? So, for the individual that asked this, the interviews are chosen of whatever field or professional you desire to interview. We will help you make that happen. And what I usually tell students and families is imagine that you are in the middle of your career. You're an adult that's been working in a career that you love for, let's say, a few decades now, and you got to that point through a series of trials or difficulties or adversity, but you're finally doing really what you love. And one day you receive a phone call from an 18-year-old student that explains to you they're taking time off to explore what they want to do or how they may want to spend their career, and your career falls in their area of interest. And they're asking you for an hour or 2 hours of your time to help them kind of see if this may be something they really want to do or not. And Road Trip Nation has proven, through their interviews and their process, that people really, really respond well to that. And of course, people are going to want to share the careers that they're passionate about with people that could potentially be passionate about the same thing. So that's how we assist. And then you're there in that second phase of making the bookings and scheduling as much of the route as possible with Road Trip Nation experts in this, and with Rustic Pathways, travel experts in the program leaders. So they're there for you. And then I believe the same individual asked, how exactly are you assisted in finding your career path? And certainly it's a give and take. We can equip you with the power to interview whoever you want for 3 months. And whatever variety of people you want for 3 months. And we hope that that variety, or maybe honing in or narrowing down to that one interest, depending on what side of the scale you're on, will help you in that career path. But of course, it will be through you and through that last phase in New Orleans of us kind of guiding you of how to take that information and run with it in university. It will be up to you to really take that and ask yourself, what did I learn on this? Who did I interview that made an impact, and where do I kind of see myself taking this after experiencing what I just did? So what about you, Megan? Interviewing or setting up these interviews, any kind of quick anecdotes or stories about making the phone calls or making the bookings? And then I think we'll wrap up.
Sure. We found interviews. I mean, we tweeted at people, we stalked their email through their website. We just were really bold and brazen without being rude. But I was so surprised. I thought people would reject us left and right. The only people who said no were interested but unavailable because they were like on vacation or whatever. So many more people said yes than no. And I think if you frame it, you're not looking for a job, you're not looking for them to give you anything but an hour of their time and to tell you about their personal story. And to the point about if your teammate or your partner is interested in someone who's doing something that isn't necessarily up your alley, that said, their specific story, no matter what they're doing, is going to have some universal application. There were all these interviews that I didn't myself schedule, but there would be these little wisdom nuggets, and I can't even tell you, they play in my head all the time. I'm 4 years out, and I still hear the voices of these people giving me their specific story, and it's uncanny how much it applies to you. So it's easier than it might seem. It's hard because you have to do it tactfully, but it's easier because people genuinely want to help young people. They genuinely want to tell you about their story and what they've learned, because they don't want you to learn it the hard way, the way they had to. And so you don't have to.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. So that is all the questions we'll get to now. There's one more that just came in. And for that individual, I will be in contact with you tomorrow morning. Looks like it's a question about scholarships and fundraising. For those of you interested in scholarships, we do have gap year scholarships that we've awarded, but visit our website, and under the financial aid section, there's some helpful resources about fundraising and the scholarships that we do. However, with this individual, I will be in touch. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in. Thank you very much, SHARIF and Megan. for calling in and sharing your experiences with us this evening. I hope you guys have a good Friday and a great weekend wherever you're at. And then for those of you that tuned in, again, feel free to get in touch for any more information, or if you have additional questions, whether that's for myself, Rustic Pathways, Megan, or Sharif. We'd love to hear from you guys. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.